Well, with all this talk of how a hung parliament will work federally, on a state level, the residents of Tasmania have now had about 4 months to get used to it. Their election earlier this year failed to deliver anyone an outright majority, and so Labor formed a minority government with the support of the Greens, even including 2 Greens MPs in the cabinet. The state's Premier, David Bartlett, believes the situation's working well, although the Tasmanian opposition claims the government's scared of making decisions for fear of triggering a split. To discuss the Tasmanian situation and federal issues, I was joined a short time ago from Hobart by the Tasmanian Premier, David Bartlett. Premier Bartlett, thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Lee.
Before the Tasmanian election this year, you were asked about the possibility of a minority government, and you said, "A deal with the Greens is a deal with the devil, and I'm not going to sell my soul for the sake of remaining in power." Of course, you did do a deal with the Greens to form a minority government. Has it required you to sell your soul?
Look, absolutely not. The facts of the matter are that politicians from all sides, in all places, do want to run fear campaigns about hung parliaments, about minority governments. But the truth is, and my conclusion after the last 4 months of stable and certain minority government is that there is nothing to be afraid of here. That in fact, stable minority governments can deliver real certainty, in our case has delivered real certainty to the Tasmanian people, has in fact delivered 1,200 extra jobs since the election, and has delivered a strong economy, and has delivered real certainty within the Parliament. There's nothing to be afraid of as long as the parties around the table, the people in the Parliament, the individuals in the Parliament, have a genuine desire to make it work in the best interests of their constituents.
You mentioned jobs. According to the Tasmanian opposition, unemployment in Tasmania is the highest of any state in the country, and it accuses the Tasmanian government of inertia, saying you haven't made any significant decisions in the past 4 months because you fear a split emerging. Is that the case?
Absolutely not, and I guess that's my point. Oppositions, and essentially Will Hodgman and the Tasmanian Liberals did have an opportunity to form a government before the Governor essentially said to me that I had a constitutional obligation to endeavour to form a government. I took the view that to provide certainty and stability, the best way we could do that, and I say to use the talent that was available in the Parliament, we invited 2 of the Green members into our cabinet, and in doing so created a protocol to deal with any, disagreements in policy that we had. Now, to date, until Monday's cabinet meeting just gone, in fact, there had been no need to invoke that protocol. We've recently invoked it, but with all good relationships, of course, the test is how you deal with disagreements, and we've come through that test, I believe, with flying colours.
What are the essential elements that you think would be needed to make a federal minority government work, to provide this certainty and stability that you say is essential?
Well, look, we have a particular model, and it's a very good model, that deals through a exchange of letters with the protocols where we can't come to a negotiated outcome. Everything to date, until Monday, as I said, had come to a negotiated outcome between the members of Cabinet, effectively. On Monday, we had an issue that we went to the election with. The Greens had a very different policy. It wasn't possible to get a negotiated outcome, so we invoked that protocol. But that simply means the Parliament will make a decision on those sorts of issues. And they will be few and far between, and we will manage them in a mutually respectful way. And I guess that's one of the key elements. Mutual respect for each other's positions and a desire to find a negotiated outcome or to deal with disagreements in a mutually respectful way.
Well, since
Building
Labor,
trust, breeding...
Since Labor and the Greens allied in Tasmania, the state opposition says planning's underway on policies that include a Bill of Rights, the introduction of euthanasia, legal brothels and a unilateral ban on coastal housing developments. Doesn't that give weight to Tony Abbott's argument that a Labor government with the Greens holding the balance of power trends everything to the left?
Well, look, I think the Liberal opposition here in Tasmania are doing exactly what I predict Tony Abbott will do, and that is be as divisive as he possibly can. There is a new politics in Tasmania, and that new politics, and it's a new politics, by the way, that I believe the vast bulk of Tasmanians want, and I think if you see election results in the UK, here in Australia, increasingly we see constituencies wanting their politicians to work together in a mutually respectful way for better outcomes. Yes, the Liberal Party here in Tasmania is stuck in the past, and what they want to do is create the illusion of some sort of division or uncertainty, but the opposite is in fact true. My message to the people of Australia is that there is nothing to fear from minority governments. In fact, there's a lot to be optimistic about.
Okay, if we could turn to the events of the weekend, who should be held accountable for Labor's poor performance federally?
Well, look, I often say these days when I'm speaking to groups of Tasmanians, I say it was you, the Tasmanian people, who chose this outcome. It's our responsibility as politicians to make it work. And that's essentially who's responsible, the Australian
but
people.
who's responsible for federal Labor after one term in office, just one term in office after 12 years in opposition, now being on the cusp of losing government? Whose fault is that?
Well, I think this is a classic question, I suppose, of old-style politics, of fault, of blame, of division, when actually what we should be talking about and what the national debate should be about now, underscored by the fact that there is nothing to be afraid of here, is how do we make this work in the best interests of all Australians?
But you're a Labor... I'm sorry to cut you off, but you're a Labor Premier. You're one of the party's leaders around the country. I'm asking your opinion of what went so wrong with the Labor campaign that you lost a whole swag of seats to the point that you're now on the cusp of losing government federally after just one term.
Well, I think Julia Gillard, as Prime Minister, has done an excellent job and will make an extraordinary Prime Minister.
Well, the voters on the weekend clearly didn't agree.
My personal view is that if Julia Gillard had not been our leader and our Prime Minister, Labor would have done a lot worse. But I say this, that when it comes to forming a minority government that has broad support, that brings ideas together, that forms negotiated outcomes on policies, Julia Gillard, and I know her well, is in the very best position, has the best skills, the best personal traits to make that happen. Tony Abbott is a figure of division. He has his politics is played on divisiveness. Julia Gillard is in a position that she can use her skills, her abilities, her intellect to bring together a coalition that will work for the long term and in the interests of all Australians.
All right. The federal Labor candidate and former West Australian Minister Alana McTiernan says Labor's campaign was atrocious and that until we have a change in the whole culture about the way we run campaigns, until we transcend the reliance on a set of political cliches, we're not going to get anywhere. What do you think of that statement?
Well, I don't disagree with the latter part of that statement, that Australians, and certainly Tasmanians, have said loud and clear to Tasmanian politicians they want a new style of politics. They want a new narrative, a new way of dealing with each other and of showing mutual respect for each other's positions. Look, we've had 30 years of elections in Tasmania that have been based on fear. Fear of the Greens taking jobs, fear of a whole range of things. I am setting out, and with my coalition partners, and I give full credit to the Greens leader Nick McKim in Tasmania. We are setting out to ensure that no credible political party can run that fear campaign again in Tasmania, and that we will deal with whatever the Tasmanian people present to us in the form of a future parliament, and we will deal with it maturely, cooperatively, with mutual respect, in a way that builds trust between parties, builds trust between people, and builds trust between the Parliament and the people of Tasmania. That's what we've set out to do in Tasmania, and the early signs, the first 4 months, are very, very good.
Tasmanian Premier David Bartlett, many thanks for making time to speak to us tonight.
Great to be with you, Lee. Thank you.